Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Deborah Thompson, and I'm the president and founder of One Health Lessons. Today, we will be reviewing the story behind the COVID-19 vaccine. This particular lesson is designed for adults at least the age of 18 years, and this particular lesson is meant for the general public. You do not need to have a science background for this lesson. This is really a story that I feel everybody can relate to and everybody should know about. Let's get started. In the last lesson, the lesson that's found at onehealthlessons.com that's focused on COVID-19 and One Health, you have been able to review what is One Health, what is a species, what is a zoonotic disease, a mutation, and a vaccine. Just to review quickly, the One Health concept is that interrelationship, it's that interconnection between our health and the health of the environment, animals, and plants. Now, can anybody guess? And maybe Celine can help call on people because I can't see everybody's faces, but can anybody just venture a guess? What is a word to describe the One Health approach? And if you don't know it, that's totally fine. We're here for the lesson.
Precious?
Yeah, it's teamwork.
Great. Thank you, Precious. Teamwork or collaboration. Now, there's a difference between collaboration and cooperation. Collaboration is more geared towards, say, teamwork, where everybody gets to benefit and contribute in an equal way. So the One Health approach is really collaboration. It's teamwork between people of different backgrounds, strengths, disciplines, cultures. We come together and we prevent and solve health problems. Now, what are these health problems? It could be physical health problems, or it could be mental health problems. The gamut is quite large when it comes to addressing a problem with the One Health approach. Moving forward, now, if you have had the opportunity to teach this lesson to children, you probably remember the way we describe mutation is change. It's as simple as that. A change can strengthen something, it can weaken something. It can just neutrally change that thing. Just like a mutation can strengthen a virus, it can weaken a virus, or it can just change it and have no real consequences to its strength. Now, who and what gets vaccines? People and animals certainly can, and it may surprise you, but plants actually get something called pseudo-vaccines. You're welcome to explore that a little bit more, and I can provide some links, but the links are available in the slide notes section of this particular slide. Moving forward, today, what will we actually be reviewing? We're reviewing the immune system. What is a protein? What is mRNA, otherwise known as messenger RNA? And what is translation? Translation is not just English to Spanish to Arabic to Luganda. Translation means something specific in biology. But let's get into the real reason why we're talking today. I wanted to share this incredibly inspirational story of Dr. Catalina Carrico. She has a PhD, and that's why she's the doctor. And she's really the woman behind the mRNA vaccine. And while some people say, oh, this vaccine happened all of a sudden, it really did not just happen all of a sudden. And this is why I'm sharing her story with you today. Dr. Catalina Carrico, she comes from Hungary. She came from a very, very small town. It was kind of like a village. Her father was a butcher. Her mother was a bookkeeper. And she was always a curious child, she said. And coming from Hungary, back in the 1970s, that's when she started her studies. That's when she first heard about mRNA, messenger RNA, that we'll be discussing soon. But in 1985, in the 80s, she had the opportunity to move to the United States, all of those miles and kilometers away, to further her studies as a postdoctorate fellow at a university in the United States. So she moved her 2-year-old child and her husband with her to the United States. Now, some of you may not have been alive back in the 80s, but that's really something to see that a woman was able to acquire a prominent position and move her family there. That's saying something. So back in Hungary, when she was younger, she first studied biology, and then she became a biochemist in graduate school. So we probably know what biochemists are. I have a question for you. What do you think a biochemist can contribute to medicine? And what have they contributed to medicine, both human medicine or veterinary medicine, so far in this world? And this is not a rhetorical question. Please, let's brainstorm together. Think about, what do biochemists do in the lab? Celine.
Yes, I'm not too sure. I can't lie.
Okay. Well, then this could be a rhetorical question.
Oh, okay. Nadira, put up her hand.
Awesome, Nadira, please go ahead.
Because they learn about how biochemistry works in the body.
Yeah. And biochemistry, is the relationship of how chemicals work within a biological system. So within a cell, there are so many chemicals within the cell that make the cell function, right? And so these biochemists understand really what's happening at the molecular level. And so biochemists, they are sometimes the ones behind doing the research that will inspire future medications, future vaccines, and so much more. So they have contributed a lot. Who do you think biochemists tend to work with outside of their particular niche field of biochemistry? Any ideas? Taking the One Health approach, for instance, say if there's a biochemist who wants to work towards having creating a type of insulin that is given once a month. Maybe that'll exist in 100 years. I don't think it'll exist anytime soon. But how or who would that biochemist be working with to achieve such a accomplishment? I think
Paris?
They usually work a lot with like pharmaceutical firms and companies, I think.
Yeah, pharmacists, pharmaceutical companies. They can also work with policy too. So they're not only in the labs working, with their white coat on, but they can also be working with policy and helping further the awareness of some upcoming medications and vaccines. So in your opinion, what is an important characteristic of a successful scientist or engineer or STEM advocate? So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So there's no right or wrong question or answer here. I just want to know, what's your opinion?
Yes, Leslie.
I'd say curiosity.
Nice. Anybody else? Well, we have,
Erin?
oh, please, yes.
I would say perseverance.
Nice. I agree with both of those. Anybody else?
Pauline? Pauline, your hand is up.
Oh, yeah. A successful scientist is supposed to be yearning for more knowledge all the time, able and willing to learn.
Nice. So motivated, passionate, right? Curious, determined. Okay, I like all of these adjectives. This is wonderful. we have the pleasure of hearing from the mouth of Dr. Carrico how she sees the characteristics of her team contributing to the success of her team.
I have a team at the BioNTech to be, curious and not walk like, oh, this is always like that, but why is that? Yeah, that kind of thing. So I was, curious and I had very good teachers in Hungary.
Well, look at that. We're all right. So well done, everybody. Well done. So, Dr. Carrico, being a biochemist, and I think it was on her undergrad, she was a biology major. She understood the immune system, but not everybody does. And that's totally fine. Everybody has we all have our strengths, right? So if you were to explain the immune system to a child, how would you actually explain it? I'll give you 5 seconds to think. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Bima,
Something that helps you fight back diseases.
Nice. Okay. Anybody else, Celine?
Pauline, is your hand up again?
Yes, immune system is a body defense.
Nice. Okay, awesome. We are definitely moving in the right track. But what happens when there is something called an autoimmune disease? That's when the immune system wreaks havoc on itself, which is a problem. So here's the way that we describe what I think the best all-encompassing way to explain the immune system is it's the part of a body that fights anything recognized as strange. So think of it like you get a splinter and then eventually it becomes red, it gets swollen, there's heat there. It's because all of these white blood cells are going to that area because the white blood cells recognize something strange there. Okay, and yes, it is our defense. But sometimes when the immune system recognizes a part of our own body that should be considered normal, but it misidentifies it and it signals to attack because it looks strange to the haphazard immune system, that's when you can get an autoimmune disease. And an autoimmune disease can happen with like lupus, for instance, if you're familiar with that. So I think the best all-encompassing way to say it is, yes, it's meant to be the defense in our body. But how do we know what to attack? How do we know what's normal or what's not normal? It's because that part of the body is designed to try to recognize anything that's out of the ordinary. So the immune system happens in animals and people, and there's kind of like a pseudo immune system in plants. So there are definitely defenses that happen if there's a parasite that's attacking a plant. Now, the immune system is made up of a lot of things. And certainly white blood cells are the quintessential parts of the immune system. And those are the cells that look for anything that's strange in the body. So there are some different examples of different types of white blood cells. The fancy way to say white blood cells, and this is good trivia knowledge, is leukocytes. Leuko, L-E-U-K-O, means white. Cyte is a fancy way to say cells. So leukocytes, white cells, they're white blood cells. Now, I don't necessarily expect you to know this, but I'm curious, does anybody out there know 1 or 2 or 3 examples of a white blood cell? Because white blood cell is like a class of cells.
Yes, Odion. No, sorry, Precious.
Oh, okay. Lymphocytes.
Lymphocytes. Okay, awesome. I think I see a Hannington, yeah?
I can hear you. We have neutrophils.
Neutrophils, perfect. So I hear neutrophils, I hear lymphocytes. Anybody else?
Precious.
Eosinophils.
Eosinophils, ooh, that's fancy. Yeah. Anybody else?
Iris.
That's what I was going to say, but also monocytes.
Monocytes, yeah. And when monocytes, this is like getting really detailed now. Monocytes are what you call a particular type of cell within the bloodstream. What do you call it when it's outside the bloodstream in the tissue?
Macrophage.
Wow.
T lymphocytes.
Yeah, macrophage. Yeah, wow, we have a very educated group here. Awesome. So for those that are not in the medical field, it's totally fine. But if you are ever a patient of a doctor, or if your dog or cat or cow gets sick and you speak with your veterinarian, they might be talking about certain things that are leukocytes or white blood cells. And the way clinicians and researchers in the medical field know what's going on with the immune system is that we take account of what is the number of different types of white blood cells compared to what's normal in that particular species. So I just identified in this one picture, here's an outline of what's called a neutrophil. This bubbly looking thing is what's called a macrophage or a monocyte if it was in a blood sample. And this is what's called a lymphocyte. So since we have lots of different cells here and not just one type of cell over and over and over again, as you see on the right, we are more likely to think that this is inflammation. And this is inflammation in a dog, actually. Now, looking on the very far right, this is another type of white blood cell. It's either going to be, and you tell me, do you think it's lots of neutrophils? Do you think it's lots of macrophages? Or do you think it's lots of lymphocytes?
Precious.
I think it's lots of lymphocytes.
Yeah, there's lots of lymphocytes. It's taken in a cat and it's evidence of lymphoma. So people may be surprised or they may not be, but just like people who get lymphoma, animals can also get lymphoma. And comparing and contrasting human medicine to veterinary medicine, that's called comparative medicine. Some people even call it one medicine. Okay, so time to work through a model of the immune system. Now, what did we say the immune system was about? It's really looking for anything deemed strange, out of the ordinary. Over the next 10 seconds, I want you to all try and write in the chat box if you can, at least 3 differences between the picture on the left and the picture on the right. I'll be counting. Ready, set, go. Okay, we're at 11 seconds now. So let's see. In the chat box, Celine, what do you see as answers?
A spider in the grass.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's a difference there. Any other?
Sorry, I see song notes as well.
Good.
In the chat.
Any others?
Black outline of musical lines.
Yep.
That's about it.
Okay. A few others could say, look at how many points there are to the sun. I know that's very subtle. And then how about the amount of grass here versus here on the far right? So lots of different changes. They could be subtle. And that's really why the immune system has to be on top of itself when you're looking for things that are out of the ordinary, because they're the defense, right? Okay, so moving on, find the single difference in 10 seconds between these 2 photos. I'll give you 10 seconds. Ten seconds is up. Any answers?
The green tip at the end of the right.
Awesome. Exactly. And that's a really good example when you try to explain the immune system to children, have them compare 2 different images with each other, have them practice. What are the differences? What are the similarities? Now, the other thing that's important with the immune system and the whole reason why vaccines are made is because we something that's out of the ordinary. So let's check your memory and see who remembers what is One Health. And let's say, what is the One Health approach? And you could shout it out or you could put it in the chat box.
In One Health, there are a number of organizations to work for a system.
Perfect, perfect. And the one word we described was collaboration. So that is wonderful. Thank you very much, Tariq. Can somebody name 2 changes that you saw in that very first Find the Differences activity? What was the first Find the Differences activity? It was the picture of the bird and the tree and the grass.
So the size of the grass and the sun.
Awesome. And Pauline, do you have something to add?
Yes, the
And
color of the
second is
onion.
green tip.
Yeah, the color you said. I think of the musical notes, Pauline. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's test our memory a little bit more. I mean, sure, we're adults, but we're not too ancient, right? We have a memory. So what's the difference? Ooh, this is a question from the previous lesson. What is the difference between a vaccine and a medication?
A vaccine to develop immune system and medication to
Bima?
Vaccine is given before you get the disease and medication is after you get the after you get the
Yeah, typically that's the way it goes. A vaccine is meant to help strengthen the immune system, and a medication is meant to save the day after you already are sick. You don't want to necessarily give a medication if you're not sick, because then you can lead to other issues that we are not necessarily going to be talking about today. But great job, team. Great job, everybody. Okay, so now I want to figure out, how are we going to discuss a protein with a child? Because the point of One Health Lessons is not just to acquire our knowledge, right, and improve our knowledge in science, but we want to share this knowledge with others. And the best way to do it is by speaking with kids. So the best way, in my opinion, to explain what a protein is, it's just something that's really, really, really small. You can't actually see it, typically. It's on a cell or a virus, and it has a function. And there are some proteins, like antibodies, for instance, that are produced by cells, and that also has a function. So the key thing to remember is that a protein has a function. And as you can see in this demonstration here, this diagram, there are a lot of proteins there. We are going to be focusing right now on that spike protein that's on the outside of SARS-CoV-2, which is that type of coronavirus that has led to the COVID-19 pandemic and is in the news today. And I'm sure it will be influencing a lot of things in the future. So the important thing with the spike protein that you all need to recognize is that it acts like a key. If you don't have the spike protein, you're not going to enter into a cell. And the other thing that's really, really, really important is the only way this vaccine can replicate, can make more of itself, is by being inside of a cell. So if you address the key and you change and you block how the key can enter into the metaphorical door into the cell, then it's not going to be able to replicate. And that's the idea. We'll be discussing that a little bit more. You might remember from the last lesson, we go over 2 different parts of a virus. There's that outer shell and that inner core. That inner core is responsible for how much a virus can replicate, its ability to replicate. The outside of it is responsible for the ability for it to infect a cell. Do you remember that from the last class? Now, going on, what is mRNA? Now, keep in mind, this is a really, really, really basic explanation of mRNA, but that's okay because we are keeping it on the superficial level, you are not necessarily going to be going to do your postdoctorate tomorrow. So let's just keep it simple. What is mRNA? Messenger RNA. It's really the instructions to build a protein. Now, when we talk about building a protein, and we just said that a protein has function, and it's a very, very, very small structure. Think of something that requires building and something that has a function. And something that we can all relate to, regardless of where we are on this planet, is building a bookshelf. How many, raise your hand, have you built a bookshelf? I have built many, many a bookshelf. I have seen these tools and I have used these tools and I have seen these instructions. So I followed these instructions to build a bookshelf. Now, let's use the bookshelf as a model. The bookshelf can serve a purpose. It has a function. What is the function of the bookshelf? It would be to hold books. But you can't have a bookshelf if you don't have the instructions to build it. This is how we can explain mRNA or messenger RNA to children. Any questions so far? Okay, moving on. So, translation. In biology, it's that process of building protein. So you read the instructions, that's the mRNA, and you build a final product, which is a protein. That whole process is called translation. Okay, going back to Dr. Carrico, she saw the power of mRNA, those instructions to build proteins. My questions to you are really, if you know the purpose of mRNA, which is to, of course, create proteins, and you know what proteins do, they all have functions, so they could be responsible for sending a message from cell to cell. They can give the cell a structure, so the cell doesn't collapse. There are a lot of different functions of a protein. So what happens if you can change the function of a protein? Well, a lot can happen. And so Dr. Carrico recognized the importance of messenger RNA research. And since the 1970s, she applied for so many grants and she was rejected one after the other after the other. In research, I don't know if you're all familiar with the life of a researcher, particularly in academia at the university level, but there's a hierarchy there. And if you are not at the very top, called the primary investigator of a research project, then you are dependent on that primary investigator for your livelihood. She was not the highest in the order of her research group, and the top person left. And because she was struggling to get research funded for messenger RNA research, she was demoted. And can you imagine how you would feel? She's been doing this since the 1970s. There was, I remember hearing an interview of hers where she was saying that 7 people applied for 6 grants with the federal government to sponsor research. 6 others were granted the grant. She was not. So while people, the general public, could say, oh, well, mRNA research has not been really done. No. It has been done because of Dr. Carrico and her small subset of colleagues who had tirelessly ignored the naysayers and just continued with their mission. Because if you can change a protein's function, you can change so much in biology. So this is how she was finally able to succeed. What happened is one day she was at the University of Pennsylvania where she was working, and she went to the photocopy room. I don't know if Yeah, sure. We're all adults. We all know what a photocopy machine looks like. I'm not sure if like 6-year-olds these days would know it. Anyway, she goes to a photocopy room in the university and she strikes up a conversation with a stranger. And she says, "Hi, I'm Cataline Carrico, and I do work with messenger RNA. And my goal is X, Y, and Z." And instead of thinking that what she's saying is foolish, as everybody else had been doing, it seemed, this person thought, yeah, she's really onto something. There is great potential in furthering research with messenger RNA. Now, something to recognize is that messenger RNA typically is single-stranded. It's very, very, very small. As you can imagine, proteins are small, so of course their instructions are very small. And messenger RNA, because it's single-stranded, it's very delicate. It doesn't withstand the environmental hazards as well as, say, a double-stranded piece of, say, DNA, for instance. That comes in handy when we're talking about something that's coming up soon. So since then, mRNA research, since she has partnered with this other person who she met, his name was Dr. Wiseman, in that photocopy room long ago, right before the millennial changed, mRNA research has been used to fight cancer, such as melanoma. You may or may not know, but people can get melanoma and animals can get melanoma, just like lymphoma can happen in people and other animals. Again, does anybody remember what I said before about that comparative? I was just gonna, what is the type of medicine or the term used to relate veterinary medicine and human medicine? Does anybody remember that term?
Comparative medicine.
Yes.
One medicine.
Yes, comparative medicine, one medicine. Thank you. Yes, you see why I'm laughing, because I almost gave the answer away. Okay. But mRNA research has also been helpful to find new options for medications and to create vaccines. So why are we talking about Dr. Carrico and mRNA and vaccines? Well, because the world is now undergoing a pandemic. Pardon me? Oh, I couldn't hear, I'm sorry. So anyway, when it comes to mRNA, a lot of things have changed. While she was experiencing rejection and frustration, now she is saving lives with the mRNA research and vaccines that have been developed because of her research. So what had changed in the last 50 years? Remember what I was just saying about single-stranded versus something that's double-stranded? You may or may not have heard of something called cold chain. But what happens with mRNA, it being single-stranded, it is very delicate, and heat can destroy that single strand of mRNA. Therefore, whenever you're moving mRNA, messenger RNA, from one place to another, it has to be kept very cold. When we talk about cold chain, we talk about transporting items in such a cold environment that we keep the stability of that thing we're protecting. So because technologists, because engineers, because physicists have been able to improve cold chain technology, we are now able to use in 2020, 2021, 2022, mRNA vaccines. Okay, so why did scientists want to focus on the spike protein of the novel coronavirus? Does anybody have an idea right now? We said that the spike protein acts like a key. So why would a scientist want to focus on the key? Remember, if we only have Bima.
Oh, sorry.
To develop a vaccine?
Okay. Yep. So the vaccines, all the vaccines with COVID as of right now are targeting the spike protein. Yep. That's right. But my question is, why the spike protein? Why not the lipid capsule? What's colored in purple on the slide?
Yeah, I think it's because the spike proteins are used as a mode of attachment to the other cells. Yeah, for entry into the cells.
Great, that's part of it. Anybody else?
How they affect the host
Yeah,
immune system.
yeah, exactly. So think of it like this. If we have a key to get a door open, then we want to make sure that the body recognizes that the key is something out of the ordinary. We want to get that immune system revved up and identify that that key is the problem. Now, what do we do if we only want the key to be identified and not all the other extra bits of the virus? We focus on the key, which is that protein, and the way we can only make that protein is by using mRNA. We use those instructions. So if we have the key recognized as something odd by the immune system eventually creates antibodies against this spike protein, again, the key. Then those antibodies can attach to the spike proteins and interfere with it entering into cells. In addition, if we have identification of spike proteins and the antibodies are floating around in the blood system, then you can identify a free floating virus in your blood system or in your body, and the white blood cells can go attack the virus and kill the virus. So there are a lot of different steps in here. I don't want to dive into too much detail, but in a nutshell, why did scientists really want to focus on the spike protein is because they wanted to get in the way of having the virus enter into the body and also try to get the body to attack the virus even before it gets to the point of meeting a host cell. The other thing that's, should I mention that now? No, I'll mention that later. Okay, so the mRNA vaccine. This type of vaccine is the thing that trains the immune system to only look for that spike protein. Okay, these little squiggles here, it's single-stranded, and this is just mRNA, messenger RNA. So the only thing it produces is the spike protein. It does not create a whole new virus. Another type of vaccine that's been out there is with an adenovirus vaccine. Now, this adenovirus vaccine, something important to realize is that viruses can be RNA viruses or DNA viruses. DNA viruses can be a lot more, they can withstand a lot of changes with heat, for instance. Sorry, can we, I think my bell, if you can mute, that would be great.
Are you in the meeting?
So when it comes to double-stranded, that is a lot more heat resistant. So it's a lot more stable in in a variety of different temperatures. Okay, so why is that important? We said that the mRNA vaccine can be quite delicate if it gets too hot or it gets exposed to too much heat. What would a double-stranded vaccine like this one withstand? Like, what's the difference? Can anybody help explain the difference? And specifically in the logistics of bringing a vaccine from one place to the other. Okay, so when it comes to mRNA vaccines, they're a lot more delicate, right? Unless you have really good equipment and the cold chain system is appropriate in that country, the vaccine itself may not be as as sturdy, as reliable as an adenovirus vaccine. An adenovirus vaccine, it took longer to create that compared to an mRNA vaccine, but it can withstand a little bit more demands when it comes to heat exposure. Okay, so especially in areas of the world where refrigeration, or even, it's much colder than refrigeration, if that's limited, then probably an adenovirus vaccine is the way to go. But here's the difference between an mRNA vaccine and an adenovirus vaccine. So the adenovirus vaccine has a DNA with a very small change to the DNA, changed by biochemists, to eventually create the mRNA that's meant to create the spike protein. Now, if you inject this entire virus, and this virus is supposed to be benign, it's not supposed to cause any problems, but it enters into a cell, into the host, so an animal or a person, and it pretty much injects this DNA into the cell nucleus, and that's where you create the mRNA. Now, with the mRNA vaccine, what happens is that you're only injecting this into the cell, or well, you're only injecting this into the body, and that eventually gets into the cells. From this step, that's when the cell creates spike proteins, and that just helps signal the rest of the immune system. But the difference between this adenovirus type of vaccine and the mRNA vaccine is that within the body, the adenovirus vaccine takes a few more steps to eventually meet the same end goal. And what's their end goal? What's their target? Is that spike protein. Now, researchers initially thought that the spike protein would be probably the safest to target, because a key can only change so much if it's going to open up a door, right? There are limitations. So they were not expecting to have many mutations with the spike protein. But the way evolutionary biology goes, there are going to be mutations to avoid or to evade ways to kill the virus, and we're going to talk about that very shortly. So what is the goal of vaccines? It's really to strengthen the immune system, to create memory. And the way we create memory, just remember that antibodies created by the body are in the realm of creating memory for the immune system. That's all you need to know. So they're meant to strengthen the immune system. Now, question for you all: will vaccines alone stop the pandemic? I see Abby shaking her head. Yeah, exactly. The answer is no. Okay. So what more do we need to do? Dauda?
Hello?
Yes, please. What more do we
Here.
need to do?
All right, of course, thank you. I think, simply put, we need to stop the spread. That is just it. So whatever you're going to do, all the COVID-19 protocols in your country or your area, you just make sure you obey all of them. And those are sometimes specific to certain areas, things that are obtainable in those areas. But on a generic note, you use your nose mask as much as you can. Avoid spaces where there's no ventilation, avoid crowd, and go about with your hand sanitizers and all of that. So I think if we obey all those protocols, we'll try as much as we can to stop the spread with or without the use of vaccine. If we don't do things that conform to the slogan of stop the spread, we're really just going to keep complicating issues, because COVID in particular, the virus in question mutates a lot, as we have seen over time. So just stop the spread. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. And here's the kicker. Thank you for that, Dowda. Here's the kicker. So we have to stop the virus from replicating in new people. How does it get into new people? It's by people, breathing in the virus, touching our eyes, touching our nose, touching our mouth, not washing our hands properly. But why is that so important? It's because every single time a virus replicates, and how does it replicate? I said this before, the only time a virus can replicate is if it's inside of a cell. You're not going to have a floating virus in midair replicate. It doesn't happen like that. The only way a virus makes more of itself is if it's inside of a cell. So we don't want that to replicate. Revisiting the mutations, does anybody remember the one word we use to describe a mutation?
Change.
Change, perfect. So do we have to be afraid of mutations? No. We have to respect mutations and we have to track mutations so that we can be on top of it. This is a really helpful video that I think you will all appreciate. Let's see what this dives into mutations and variants. So let's go through this together.
Cells. Mutations are random errors. But the longer a virus is around and the more people it infects, the more it will change. And the more those changes accumulate, the more chances the virus has to evolve into something more dangerous. These 4 variants, considered variants of concern by the World Health Organization, all have mutations on the spike protein. Delta, the most recent addition to this list, has been referred to as a double mutant, because while it has many different mutations, it has 2 significant ones we've seen before. This mutation seems to make the virus more transmissible. And a version of this one, found in 2 other variants, makes it easier for the virus to reinfect people who have already had COVID-19, meaning these 2 mutations may have evolved to dodge our natural immune response. Fortunately, the immune response we get from vaccines is much stronger than our body's natural immune response. So while we may see variants that make our vaccines somewhat less effective, most experts think it's unlikely one will emerge that completely evades our vaccines. But that doesn't mean it can't happen.
If you give the virus enough time and replicative cycles, it will sample a very large evolutionary space and find a solution to the problem we've presented it, which is vaccination and widespread immunity.
But even if SARS-CoV-2 doesn't get to that point, as long as the pandemic continues, and as long as the virus continues to spread, it will continue to make copies of itself. So if we want to stop the variants, we need to stop the virus.
Okay. So moving on
Cells.
beyond that. There we are. There are 2 ways to really stop this virus. We have to stop it from getting into us, into our bodies, and we have to stop it from getting into our cells. The vaccine is meant to help prevent it from getting into our cells. What can we do to help it to prevent it from getting into us? Cover our nose and mouth, right? Stay away from people who are ill. Clean the environment properly, wash your hands for at least 20 seconds. We all know this. We've been living on this planet for the last bit, so we know what is recommended. But the 2 things to keep it really simple is we have to stop it from getting into people, and we have to stop it from getting into cells if it gets into people. Something that's worth mentioning in the video, there was mention of the immune response for vaccinated people versus people who have acquired this virus naturally. I think the jury is still out on that front, but time will tell with future research what has a stronger immune response. Okay, just summarizing and finishing this up, I want to ask you, the whole purpose of One Health, the concept again is that interconnection between our health and the health of the environment, animals, and plants. The One Health approach is teamwork, is collaboration between people of different backgrounds, disciplines, and strengths. We come together and we prevent and solve health problems. So, who contributes to vaccine creation? Anybody? Just name any Any discipline?
Biochemist.
Biochemist. Anybody else?
Immunologists.
Immunologist. Awesome. Anybody else?
Biomedical engineers.
Nice. Yeah. Anybody else?
Microbiologist.
I love this. I love this. Yeah. How about
Pharmaceutical companies.
nice pharmaceutical companies? How about the people in the, how about the volunteers who are being a part of the trials, right? What about the physicians who are a part of those trials? What about the veterinarians who are assisting in lab animal testing, right? Lots and lots and lots of people. Who ensures viable vaccines? Ooh, good question.
Biochemist.
Yeah, sure. I think that's the answer for all of these answers, or the answer for all of these questions.
Well, microbiologists play a very good role in ensuring viable vaccines as well.
Perfect.
In most cases, when vaccines have been transported from one place to another, it's handled by microbiologists in conjunction with physicians and veterinarians. So they play a very significant role. And yeah, we won't forget to mention physicians and the vets that actually administer them eventually. So in administering and getting it down to the last miles, they also play a very good role in ensuring the vaccine is still viable to the last point.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So yeah, and then what about the regulators too, the government workers who ensure that there is consistency and there's not rubbish, going into people's bodies. Like we want to make sure that there's real, legitimate, viable and respectable medications and vaccines that are going around. So who brings vaccines to communities, right? It's not just about making a vaccine and making sure it stays viable, but it's how do you bring it out there, right? There's so many people. And who can implement lessons learned? Ooh, this is a good question. Who can implement lessons learned from this pandemic?
Well, funny as it may sound, I'd say everyone. We all saw it, right? Like no matter the level of literacy, yeah, we all saw what happened. And at least the key lessons can be passed on by almost everybody. You also, well, that is how I answer that question of who implements communication of what really happened during the pandemic to, let's say, the coming generations of people in the society that didn't witness it or something like that. But yeah, the answer is just everyone. It doesn't matter the language or whatever, you just have to pass it on. Yeah, so that is why I do that anyways.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. And I think also changing policies are important, right? We have to start to have the officials or whoever the policymakers in your area support One Health efforts. It's not just protecting all of our health, but it's also making sure that we are working together of all different backgrounds. So we need to make sure that there are avenues to do this. Can these policy changes support and encourage transdisciplinary collaboration? Okay, what other types of people can protect the health of people, animals, and the environment and plants to minimize risk of another pandemic? I think Dowda kind of answered that already. The answer is pretty much everybody. And then does anybody remember that forest example from the last class? We have to work together to reverse habitat loss. Can anybody just summarize what we learned in that last class between habitat loss and biodiversity and how that plays into our own health? Yes.
I think it affects the environment, the amount of trees, nature. It affects the nature and also the ecosystem. Sorry. It also affects the ecosystem because the predators, the birds disappear, and then there's more mice, which brings other predators which carry diseases like foxes and all those wild animals. And then they live closer to the city and everyone just, yeah.
Right. It messes up the food web, right? When you have habitat loss, then the animals suffer and they have to move. And sometimes they go extinct, sometimes they get to be endangered, but then the population of all these different animals change. And then you have stress, and then you have sharing of germs. Germs can, spread to different species. So moving on in the last bit, if it's possible,
Can you mute the person giving us background noise? I would recommend you mute everyone and uncheck that allow everyone to unmute themselves so that nobody will speak when you don't allow them to speak.
Appreciate that. Aaron, I think you're host. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. How do you think Dr. Carrico would answer this question? Now that you know the background of Dr. Carrico, how do you think she would respond when asked, what would you say now to people who once rejected and ridiculed you? Okay, moving on. So what would you say now to the people who once rejected and ridiculed you? This is what she said.
I wish to tell some of those people that who put down me and ridiculed me and whatnot to see that, you see, but that's okay. I am happy that, the two leading mRNA vaccine, actually the Moderna and the BioNTech Pfizer product, both of them is including something that I contributed. So it makes me happy. Even other people will not know because, Moderna usually say that they discovered everything, but they did pay for that patent. And so.
What do you think of that? Pretty darn humble. Okay, so what do you think Dr. Carrico's answer would be to this question? Do you think you will win the Nobel Prize? Show your hands if you think she would win the Nobel Prize. I see 5 out of 25. No, now I see 10 out of 25. Okay, this is the response. And of course, we all know a Nobel Prize is very prestigious. This is her response when answering that question.
People started to see the potential.
And now they're talking about a Nobel Prize. How does that make you feel? I don't think about that I will get it. It is like I focused always on the work, and that's what excites me.
Okay, well, spoiler alert, she did not win the Nobel Prize in 2021. But she didn't give up. And you know what? Because of her research, there have been many, many, many lives saved. So a few questions to wrap up. I have 4 questions for you. Now, this was breaking news back in 2020. This showed while there were trials of a new vaccine at that time, they were saying, out of, say, 1,000 participants or 10,000 participants, there have been 95 participants out of that huge number that actually got COVID, that actually got that vaccine. Why would people with a vaccine still get COVID? How is that possible?
Mutation.
Oh, could be a new mutation. Absolutely. To evade a vaccine. Any other ideas?
Well, it could be that the vaccine failed in one way or another. Probably the cold chain was broken at some point, especially now that we're dealing with mRNA vaccine. So, well, that'll be my submission. Thank you.
Possibly, yeah. Thanks, Dauda. Anybody else? So here's a question for you all. Here's a question for you all. Does a vaccine put a shield around you? No, there's nothing to put a shield around you besides like a mask and, actually putting a shield around you. There is nothing biologically like a vaccine that'll put a shield around you. So if you are walking through a room full of the virus and you are vaccinated and your friend is not vaccinated and you're walking through that same room, guess what? The virus is going to get inside of both of you. It's just who's going to get sicker. Remember those 2 steps to stopping the spread. Number 1, stop it from getting into your body. Second, stop it from getting into your cells. The vaccine's meant to help prevent it from getting into your cells. But what can you do to stop that first step? You have to make sure it doesn't get into your body. So keep in mind, remember this, a vaccine does not put a shield around you. You are not invincible if you have the vaccine. You still have to be careful, but you are less likely to die from the virus if you are vaccinated. That's the typical way it has been up until this moment, the end of 2021. Okay, moving on to the next question. Can a vaccine alone end the pandemic? Can you explain your answer? Leslie is saying no way. Leslie, can you expand, please?
Sure. A vaccine can certainly help, but with mutations, the simple actions everyone can do will really help end the pandemic along with the vaccine.
Right, right. And keep in mind, just like the flu virus, just like the flu shots, it's just like we were teaching back in 2020, it is very likely that this vaccine for COVID will be changing with seasons, because we have to check, we have to figure out what is the strongest strain in what area of the world at what time, and that way we can tackle that with vaccines. Maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, there will be a universal vaccine. I'm not sure if technology is there yet, but certainly people are working towards it. Okay, question number 3. How can the One Health approach help to prevent a pandemic? So remember, the One Health approach is that collaboration, is that teamwork between people of different backgrounds. So how can taking the One Health approach help minimize the risk of another pandemic?
Well, I think, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Dauda and then Celine.
All right, thank you. So I think we've answered this question partly earlier. Just like we said, vaccine alone can't stop COVID in particular. So that means to prevent the coming ones, you can leave it to physicians, vets, microbiologists, or all of those guys alone, because that at the highest level of efficiency, intelligence, and everything, they can still only take care of a part of it. I'll go by the vaccine example again. Vaccines will prevent the virus from getting into your cell, but not from getting into your body. So individually, every discipline can only prevent, in terms of prevention as a whole, as a very big thing. Each profession can actually, each discipline can take their own part and play it effectively, but they can play all the parts effectively. For example, the scientists, the researchers, they can make vaccines and do all that, but you need environmentalists to let people understand what habitat loss means and how it can, induce a second pandemic or something else entirely different from COVID. So everybody needs to play their part. Everyone needs to come together, have a shared understanding of all of these concepts of pandemic and what are the things that actually predispose humanity to a pandemic, then what are the things they can do from their own professional domain to help. So the One Health approach brings everybody together to understand the problem and to create a solution that everybody has a role to play in. So it's like coming together to build a cake, and everybody takes a share in the end. So one discipline can't do it. So that is why One Health approach is inevitable in preventing the next pandemic. I don't know if that works. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Celine, did you want to add anything?
I think you covered most of it, but essentially, I think a One Health approach would help governments implement better policies, and it brings further awareness. Like, it's all a collective, it's not separated, and like everyone is fighting for their own cause. It's everyone together fighting for the same cause. So I feel like essentially better policies can be created to enable progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's synergize our strengths, right? Okay, last question. And this is really something I want to hear answers from everybody. Ready? What can you do today to promote One Health efforts in your community? Today, this week, what can you do? Because, you know, with One Health, we're talking about it, sure, but we are in 2022 and we are ready to take action. We're not just talking about this. Talking about this was so 2020. Let's take action. What are you going to do this week to get One Health awareness, One Health efforts happening in your community? Let's brainstorm.
All right.
Using my social
Sorry.
media.
Okay.
I heard somebody say social media. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Dada, I think you have something to say.
All right. So social media is good. Everything you want to do to present the information out to the public is good. But the best thing I think we can do is to live One Health ourselves. In whatever we do, we should try to, incorporate the knowledge of One Health that we have. And, now if we serve as examples to people in our community, whenever we reach out to them to give them information about the benefits of these, we have like personal evidence, individual evidence to say, this is what I do, and it helps. Even if it doesn't help, you can actually tell them, this is what I do and this is why I do it. So it gets easier for them to reckon with reasons for you doing what they're seeing than telling them, this is what you can do and this is why you can do it. You're like presenting too abstract information, which is difficult for people to take up. So what I've always been doing that I'll continue to do is, I'm a vet, though I don't know how to put it, but I serve DR purpose at the organization I serve. I help a lot with projects management that do graphics. I know a little about web design and all that too. So I'm a jack of many things. So what I do whenever I'm in the clinic, when we have a client that comes, I try as much as I can to educate them about other things, how to prevent their animals from getting sick. It's not about bringing animals to the hospital all the time. So like disease prevention, basically, that's what I promote to them. And quite a number of times, people in my clinic can actually be a witness to this. When someone comes to get antibiotics, like I'm going specifically to antimicrobial resistance. Now, when they come to get antibiotics without prescription, I do not allow anybody to sell it. They know me for that. Sometimes they don't want me in the clinic because sales will go bad, but I know it's for the greater good. So I don't allow that. I just sit them down, start talking. They'll be like, no, you talk too much to those people, sell the drugs and let them go. No, I can't do that. Like, I'll ask them why. If they have reasons to get it, why not? But if they don't have reasons to get it, no, I don't sell it. Yeah, so just like Dr. Kariku, or in the beginning, you're definitely going to get a lot of people, even people from within your profession, who complain about you doing so much. But in the end, it's worth it. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dauda. Thank you so much for sharing. Celine and then Pauline.
This week I'll be coordinating the other COVID vaccine lessons for kids. I feel like it's important for kids to have this information. The younger generation has better chances of like, they have more of an open mind, essentially. I feel like it's easier to mold their perspective to see the way the world is and the way things happen, even if we adults might choose to ignore them sometimes. So I feel like kids are more enlightened in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Celine. And Pauline, please.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm an advocate and a community journalist, specifically for health, but I can do more beyond health. So what I'll be doing in my community I'll be giving people information about One Health via social media, and those who are within my reach, I'll be talking to them physically. Thank you.
Excellent. Physically, as long as it's safe. I don't want you to be in any risk of, of the virus. So yes, please be safe, but that sounds wonderful. Thank you. Ajen and then Hannington, please.
Thank you, Madam Deborah. I'm an environmental health officer working with the local government. So straight away, I'll look at my colleagues in different departments such that we can design approaches, how we can look at our people in the community at the grassroots, see that we try to create some sensitization and awareness creation on, like my colleague have already cited about antimicrobial resistance. So we shall focus ourselves on enlightening the public. Like now in my country where I live, people use propellers. So we shall try to create an eco system where information can flow from different departments. Like we have the veterinary officers, we have the community development officers, such that if we are going in the community, we talk about something and each and every department can represent key issues regarding health. So basically, we are going to begin that way. Then later we shall try to engage those ones who are in higher offices such that good policies can be put in place to support One Health. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Hannington. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Anang, please share your thoughts.
Okay, thank you for your time. I think I have two plans for promoting One Health. The first one is by conducting a research related to One Health, and the short term about making activity in community, promoting One Health in community. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And if you need One Health lessons to help you in that, please let us know. Bima, who's also in the class today, I believe, is the senior promotions intern, and she'll be accessible to you. Thank you. So here are some ideas that I just whipped up. Some activity ideas: teach, share that knowledge. You could do that going through social media, or you can do this by putting editorials in your newspaper. Don't just talk about this with other scientists or other STEM advocates. It's like, use your time wisely. Get out to the public. Get out to the public. Make sure that they realize that our actions on the environment play a role in our own health. How are you going to do that? How are you going to get out there and speak with the public? Some other ways: invite a lesson leader to your community. Some of you might even be certified lesson leaders. Some of you are even ambassadors here, which is awesome. That means that you are good science communicators. So how can we get into more classrooms, either virtual classrooms or in person, wherever it's safe? Next, we can create community projects, just like Anang was saying and several others were saying. Keep in mind that all the month of January is One Health Awareness Month. Now is the time to plan for it. And you can always contact, if you live in an area of the world where your political, your government in your country permits this, but contact some influencers and see how you can have a voice at the policy level. And one really good way to have a voice is by voting. If you are fortunate enough to live in an area of the world where you are allowed to vote, use your voice and vote. Well, thank you all so much for spending this time together. I hope you learned something. What we'll do right now is I will stop screen sharing, and I just wish you all the best. Please let me know if you have questions afterwards, but I'll stop the recording now.